All right, we're live. Hey guys, we're just figuring out our technical issues over here. We want to be able to watch your comments on this video. We are going to be talking about the Republican National Convention that happened all last week. We both watched with great interest. There we go.
Hey. Scoot over that way a tiny bit.
Yeah. Okay. So in case you have not joined us before, my name is Kristen Howerton. I write a blog called Rage Against the Minivan.
And I'm Paul Martin. I write a blog called Paulosophia. Thing.
Oh, we're back on. Okay, we're back. I don't know what's happening. Anyway, as I was saying, Paul and I are old friends who like to debate politics. I am a Democrat.
And I am a Republican still.
Still. Are you sure?
I'm sure.
I know you're sure. I just like to tease you. The National Convention for the Republican Party was this week, which was interesting. So let's start with, the first thing that happened was there were some Never Trump supporters there, and there was some backlash and some protest and like this sort of half-hearted attempt to oust Trump out as the nominee, right?
Right, yeah, and it's very technical. I don't really understand how it works, but basically on the first day that effort was thwarted. And also what was very interesting is that Trump's campaign manager, went after John Kasich, who's the governor of Ohio. That's where the convention was. And it got so much of the headlines, but Kasich is the very popular governor of Ohio. And so it was such a blunder because you just don't do that. No Republicans ever won the White House without winning Ohio. Malford goes after Kasich on the first day of the convention, and that was the beginning of the shit show.
Yes, and it really was a shit show. And I don't know that I've seen a convention in my lifetime seem that contentious and disorganized, and it was kind of a mess. Then we had it started with this sort of parade of D-list celebrities. We have Scott Baio, we have Antonio Sabato Jr.
Did you know who those people were?
I do. Of course I do.
Would.
Of course I do. And of course you're like, who?
You're right.
Charles in Charge. Remember that? Charles in Charge. Anyway, it was a good show. Joni Loves Chachi. Happy Days. Scott Baio.
Happy Days. Yeah, I remember Happy Days.
Chachi.
Yeah,
Chachi.
I do remember
but exactly.
That. Yeah.
I mean, exactly. Like who? And I kind of feel like, on a national stage, these are the best celebrities you can get, something's really gone wrong. So that was kind of a parade of irrelevance that started off the convention.
Yeah. And so the theory was by the time it ended, and we'll go through it, but there were these kind of subplots that became bigger than the main issue, which is the message they were trying to get across. One of them was Kasich. The other one was the near coup on the floor on day one. The third was, of course, the plagiarism, which was blatant plagiarism. And there was a fourth, Cruz not endorsing.
Yes.
And so the whole time there were these subplots that were taken away from what was supposed to be happening, which is Trump's message and his messengers.
The message of fear, which we'll also talk about. Because his message was outrageous. But yeah, let's talk about the subplots really quick, and then let's get into sort of the takeaways of the Republican National Convention. Like, if I'm watching this, what are my takeaways in terms of what the platform is? But okay, let's go to the speech. Let's go to the speech from Melania.
Yeah.
And the plagiarism.
Yeah. So if you saw it, and I don't know how you wouldn't have seen it. It was very clear and blatant plagiarism. Whether she wrote it or not, she was on the air earlier that day with Matt Lauer, NBC News, saying that she wrote most of it.
Right.
But that's very doubtful. Chances are she didn't know that she had what she was doing. She just read a speech, and it was very clear that it had been lifted from Michelle Obama's speech from I think 4 or 8 years earlier. I don't remember.
And if you've not seen a side by side, if you're on Facebook, you've probably seen this side by side, but, you know, it was clearly, you know, lifting Michelle Obama's words. And then there is this, the subplot of that subplot is that, you know, the Trump campaign sort of threw this speechwriter under the bus.
Right.
But there's question as to whether or not this speechwriter is an actual person.
Yeah.
Because there's no history of this person online. Her Facebook page was created like a week ago.
Right. So there is, it ends up that there is. I learned,
okay.
yeah, there is, according to someone on CNN, one of their pundits, this guy said on CNN that he knew who she was.
Oh, okay.
So apparently it is a real person.
I liked the idea.
But the issue for the Republicans, of course, was it was just a mess, and these conventions need to be remarkably and well oiled. I mean, you don't want to be making mistakes, and apparently there, even at the event itself, there were a lot of technical difficulties. There were audiovisual problems. There was a plagiarism. There was the coup. I mean, the whole time, the thing was not legit. Now, Trump supporters and the pundits for Trump are going to say, well, that's the whole deal with Trump. He's not posh, he's not polished, and that's the appeal. Okay.
I have a theory about Melania's speech. I think what happened was she told this woman, here's some stuff I like. She quoted Michelle Obama and didn't make it clear. She assumed the speechwriter would massage those words, and the speechwriter just wrote them exact.
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, that's what happens when you have someone else. I'm writing in Jesus, teasing, but honestly. Yeah, right? I know. Yeah, we'll get to Jesus in a minute in this campaign. Okay, so that was the drama with Melania, and then the other drama was Cruz did not endorse him.
Yeah, and I walked in on that speech, and I didn't really know what was going on. And he, you know, the speech seemed like a very good speech, meaning it talked about freedom and the American way and the American dream and all these big ideas that I think people on the left and the right would, for the most part, accept. But as it went on, it became clear that he wasn't mentioning Donald Trump's name at all.
Yeah.
And I watched when he said, quote, vote your conscience. And at that point, the New York delegation, you know, the New York delegates that were right there went crazy.
Yeah.
Were booing him. And it was a gutsy move. It
was bold. And it's interesting that they had him up there. I don't know if they, you know, if they knew he would do that or not. But what's funny is then Newt Gingrich got up right after and said, and what he meant was... Yeah.
And it was a freak show because as this thing was wrapping up, Trump, you know, they knew that he might either, they knew he was going to probably not endorse him, but who knows what he could have said.
Yeah.
And so as this thing was wrapping up, if you saw it, Trump comes walking out. And the cameras, Cruz went away. The cameras were all on Trump because he was coming into the arena. It was a freak show. I mean, it was an absolute freak show.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, as we know, Trump is the master of reality TV. And there were two critical moments where he himself took the focus off of the main stage and onto himself. One was he called into the Bill O'Reilly show on Fox News.
I heard about that.
During a woman who was speaking whose child was a victim of the Benghazi attack. And so this woman was on stage, and I mean, I personally feel like it was a little left field. It was, you know, I mean, I'm sure her family's gone through devastation, but she was really standing up and like making Hillary out to be the murderer of her child who should now be in jail. So it was a little, to me, like not the best message. So he calls into Fox News Live and speaks to Bill O'Reilly at that very moment so that they're not showing footage of that woman speaking. And then it was the moment that you just described where Cruz is on stage and he walks in and all of a sudden the camera pans to him. I mean, he knew when to interrupt.
Yeah. And I don't think, I mean, the pundits don't think it was well scripted. There were a lot of errors going on the whole week. So, someone saying something?
Yeah, well, they're saying let's talk about Gary Johnson, which we actually did last week, talk about Gary Johnson. But we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
And Hillary's VP cook, we will get to that one in a moment. What was okay, so we just talked about a couple of the dramas. Was there another one?
I think so. I don't remember.
A hijack?
I don't remember. I mean, to me, the pink elephant in the room was the missing senators.
Yes.
McCain, Graham, the Bushes, the Romneys. You know, Romney was the former nominee.
Yeah.
That was the pink elephant in the room. There were reports that I think Ron Johnson, the senator, I believe, from Indiana, no, Wisconsin came, did a speech under a lot of pressure, got back to Wisconsin and had $2 million pulled because he went and endorsed Trump.
Wow.
And so there, there is the pink elephant was all of the Republicans that weren't there.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty big deal.
I think it is too. Well, let's talk about Trump's final speech, because I feel like this was kind of what everything led up to. This was the the final moment, the grand finale. His speech, I was really angered by his speech, and I'll tell you why. I felt that he was stoking fears around the recent Dallas shooting of a few police officers. I feel like he was using that scenario, which was a tragic scenario, very terrible scenario, but that was definitely an isolated incident. I mean, we do not have, in general, madmen taking aim at police officers. I mean, it has happened. It happened in Baton Rouge and it happened in Dallas, and both were, but yet he was speaking as if this is a widespread calamity, and he kept using the term law and order. I'm going to bring law and order. So he's creating a fear. Yeah. He's creating bedlam, this idea of bedlam, and then he's posturing himself as the hero to that. Right. Both of which are disingenuous.
Absolutely, and it was clear, and I thought it was one of the most distressing and confusing and upsetting speeches I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm a Republican. Yeah. I voted for Republicans. I respect many Republicans, but and he was using an old logical fallacy, which goes something like, if there were shootings, well, there must be a problem. Well, if there was disorder in a country, there would be shootings. Right. There were shootings, therefore there's disorder in a country. Right. It was that same. If the streets are wet, if it's raining outside, the streets would be wet. The streets are wet, therefore it's raining outside. Right. No, it could be sprinklers. And he used that logic and he also talked about illegal immigration a lot. And cited 3 cases, really sad and grotesque cases of illegal immigrants murdering someone. Terrible. But didn't talk about the 12 million who are going to work every day, bussing our tables, cooking our meals, mowing our lawns. It was as if these illegal immigrants were all basically hatcheting the white people. Yeah. And it was more of the same. Xenophobia,
which is statistically
racism.
Inaccurate. And what's also statistically inaccurate is there are, the truth is, in 2014, there were less shootings of police officers than in previous years, and we're on track for that to be true for 2016. Right. So this idea that, everything is insane and, there's more crime and more shootings is not necessarily the case. I think what we're seeing is a rise in public knowledge of racial bias. I don't think it's, I think that's been going on, forever, but we now have video footage and Facebook and public outrage over it. But, he's definitely making it seem like we are just doomed without him.
Absolutely. And I mean, crime has gone down for decades. Just go to FBI, Google the FBI statistics. But also what was the pink elephant in all of this fear is, then Trump, are you saying then that our police officers, because you're for the police, you're for the guys in blue, and you're for justice, so you're for our judges that put them in jail, are you saying then that our cops and our judges aren't doing their jobs? You can't have it both ways. I mean, are you indicting hundreds of thousands of law enforcement officers and people that, district attorneys and all of these people who are putting bad guys away? And he literally said on January 20th, law and order will be restored. So is he God? Is he going to suddenly?
I know, right?
It just was so preposterous. But what was more preposterous is there were millions of people saying, "Yeah, he's going to save us." Yeah,
it's ludicrous that people can't fact check what he's saying. That they will believe in a fear against this boogeyman because of 2 horrible, horrible, tragic incidences, and that that's a global issue, and that then they assume that he's going to somehow fix this. Like, how will he? I mean, Trump or Hillary and Bernie too, who I adore. None of
we're so high tech.
Even Bernie, who I love, none of them are going to fix mass shooters. None of them. I mean, no one is going to get into the presidency and take away lunatics.
Yeah.
You can try to take away some of their guns, but there's always going to be crazy people.
And it's a classic problem solution the problem is there is crime. The solution is I will fix it.
Yeah.
It's just a classic,
Political
problem.
move.
If you've been in sales,
Yeah.
here's the problem, here's the solution.
Yeah, that's very
And then
true.
also with respect to the shooting in Orlando and the shooting in San Bernardino,
Yeah.
these were Americans that shot up these, the dance
Yeah,
club,
right.
and so what would Trump and the White House do to prevent an American
Americans from
crazy
being
person
insane.
from being insane? And we all know
Yeah.
the answer is Trump could do nothing as the president. The
No.
cops could do nothing. Nobody knew it was coming,
No.
which is
Yeah.
the scary part of all
It
of
is
this.
scary.
These aren't terrorists coming in
Right.
from out of the country. These are people who live here.
Well, and I thought this was really this part really pissed me off too. He made a nod to LGBT safety, and he said, "I'm going to save you from foreign threats to the LGBT community." And then everyone clapped, and then he said, "I'm just glad everyone at a Republican convention could clap for that." So basically, he's not giving LGBT people any special rights. They still have a platform of denying rights. But what he did basically was say, like, we won't let you get killed. And then everybody claps and they all self-congratulate on how liberal and accepting they are. That's
Yeah.
not accepting. Saving American citizens from a foreign threat does not mean that you're like suddenly like an ally. I thought it was so ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, the platform that was approved the previous week was more restrictive against
Oh, I know.
LGBT rights than in the previous years. And Mike Pence, who he chose, as you know, is remarkably conservative with respect to LGBT rights.
Conservative isn't even the right word. He's discriminatory.
Right, yeah, he's taken some huge stands
including
Indiana.
voting for the bill that would allow people to, deny business services to someone based on their sexual orientation.
Right, right. And I think it comes down again to there were just a lot of people not really thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just log on to FBI crime statistics, you will
It's
see
not that hard.
in the last 8 years under Obama, I don't know, I am proud to say this because it makes me feel good that there is less crime.
Yeah.
And it's Democrat, but I mean, crime has been going down for decades.
Right.
Decades in everything, homicides, every single rapes, every single kind of
Right.
crime. Yes, it's been a bumpy few months.
Yeah.
I have questions as to why things have gone so crazy since
Yeah.
Trump became a candidate and has
Yeah.
spoken so, to me at times, viciously against people of
Yeah.
color. It's interesting, that question. Of
Yeah.
course, David Duke is another thing that we haven't talked about.
Oh my gosh.
He's thrown his ring in the hat, saying it's now time to run in Louisiana
And if you're not
for
familiar,
Senate.
David Duke is a former Klansman.
Yeah,
Yeah. And still a white supremacist. I mean, he has not repented from that.
and he's ardently a Trump supporter.
Surprise. Okay, someone asked about Gary Johnson, and I don't want to spend too much time on that because we have before, but I will say, for myself as a socialist, Gary Johnson as a libertarian is pretty much on the opposite end of this political spectrum, where, libertarian is very every man for himself, personal freedoms.
Get the government out.
Get the government out. Where I, as a socialist, I'm very much on the other end of the spectrum of wanting more services for the people, more civic services, more social services for the people. But bottom line is, I think a vote at this point for a third party candidate is a vote for, a vote that you're not giving Hillary to defeat Trump. That's how I feel.
It's really funny. It's really off the subject, but someone said, "Did you notice how he pronounced LGBTQ so slowly?" She
I
says,
know.
"I don't think he'd ever used the
No.
acronym before."
Totally.
He was like LGB.
LGB. Someone
It was-
told me I needed to get this right.
It was really odd.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Gary Johnson, former senator. These third-party candidates, it's always been a kind of weird history. Remember
Yeah.
Ross Perot, and then it was,
Yeah.
who was it? 8 years ago, I forgot, but having a blank. We'll see where that goes.
Yeah, I respect Gary Johnson, and he seems like a more reasonable choice than Trump. I don't think he would, I think he would be a fine president. He doesn't necessarily represent my political views, but I think he seems like a normal guy.
Yeah.
Like he's not going to send us into war. Someone else asked about Hillary's pick for the VP. I really don't have strong feelings about it one way or the other. I think it was a safe pick. There was someone, I think it was Kamau Bell, joking on Twitter that, like, one glass ceiling at a time, guys, because she picked a white guy.
Right.
But I think it was a safe pick. I don't think that the choice will have much of an effect at all on her candidacy.
Probably not. I mean, they usually don't. The presidential picks. I mean, if I was a Democrat, Tim Kaine would be my kind of Democrat. He's centrist.
Yes,
he's actually
exactly.
pro-life, but in his heart. But,
is he really?
Yeah, he is. But he believes that the Supreme Court and the court should ultimately decide.
Oh,
so
okay.
he's not like a Mike Pence who thinks Roe v. Wade should be overturned.
Right.
Kaine doesn't, but he's very pro-life in his personal orientation.
That was a smart pick.
He speaks Spanish fluently. He was a missionary to Honduras. He's Catholic. And he's...
I could definitely see where he would appeal to the kind of middle of the road or the disenfranchised Democrats like yourself or Republicans like yourself. Yeah. What else do you... Oh, yeah, that's it. Well, I'm trying to think. I think that was kind of it. I mean, I just feel like, the takeaway of the Republican National Convention was just attempting to create outrage and a common enemy. I think that's...
Yeah, can we talk for a minute just a little bit about, at one point in the speech, Trump said, I want to thank all of the people in the evangelical community who are standing beside me.
Yes.
And we know for sure that Jerry Falwell Jr., apparently James Dobson came out and endorsed Trump. He did say something interesting, a rare moment where he said something like, I don't believe I've always deserved...
Yes.
That was a soft moment for Trump. I know it was scripted. I know someone else wrote it.
I don't think it was the soft moment. I think it was strategic.
Oh, no, it was strategic.
Because I think every Christian watching was like, Jesus loves you.
Yeah.
Like you're admitting that you're a sinner. I thought that was just a full-on pander.
But it worked, I think.
Oh, it totally worked.
I think it worked. I think it was smart. His speech,
totally smart.
His speechwriter was interviewed afterwards, and I think, but this ongoing endorsement of Trump, given his social issues, his personal life, his stance on... I mean, that speech itself was angry. It was mean. There was no hope. I remember when I saw the movie The Dark Knight for the first time. It was the first time I left a movie. I was telling somebody who I went to the movie with how I left that film feeling down, and I don't think I'd ever seen a film that just kept grinding away. The bad guy kept winning. And there was a sense in that speech, as I watched it, that there was not just doom and gloom, but there was no joking. There was nothing positive. There was no. It was as if as if we're living in in anarchy or in Gotham City. There was just this.
It's like he was giving that speech to Zimbabwe after the Mugabe. It's like, who are you talking about?
In which country? The president came out afterwards and said, what nation is he referring to? Because in spite of these horrible and horrific crimes, for the most part, most of us are going to the store and we're shopping and we're not getting shot at.
Right.
But it's this lack of voice amongst Christians, of which I'm one, seemingly unwilling. I heard a sermon from a local church, a week ago or so, and the message was, we need to keep our mouths shut. And I immediately thought of some of my spiritual heroes, including Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who had the courage. They thought it was their duty as Christians to stand up to xenophobia and racism and people who mocked, the disabled. But there seems to be this.
But I mean, to push back against the sermon you're referring to, I mean, to be trite and do like, what would Jesus do? He was a total instigator. He was a social provocateur. He absolutely spoke up in regards to injustice in the public sphere. So why would we as Christians need to keep our mouths shut? I don't get that. I've heard it. I mean...
Yeah. And as Hitler, year after year was coming to power, there were those constituencies in the church, pacifists or these, we just need to pray. But that certainly wasn't... It doesn't seem to be the case that Jesus kept his mouth shut with respect to injustice, at times becoming flat out angry and calling people names, brood of vipers, whitewashed tombs, because of hatred, excluding the least. And so I just continue to wonder, and we've talked about it before, but this idea of ultimate allegiance being to the Republican Party in this case.
I think so too. Well, and you had told me in a different conversation how the pastor in the sermon that we're referring to said, God is not a Republican, but he said it in such a way that made that seem like I'm going to step on toes by saying this.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I'm going to be really provocative and say that God is not a Christian, where it's like, that should be apparent to all of us.
Right.
It's not. I don't know. We're getting other comments here. We as Christians don't agree on what is social injustice. That's part of the problem. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. Although I think the Bible makes a pretty clear case that helping the poor is like one of the big ones. Yeah, the whole climate is terrifying. And Kim, my sister, said, he was pushing fear the whole time, which I just completely agree. He was pushing fear.
Someone keeps referring to how he's a baby Christian.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know what he is. I think he's an excellent politician.
Why can't Republicans acknowledge the clear and undeniable faith of someone like Hillary Clinton? She has written about it. I read her biography.
Mm-hmm.
I am a Republican. I am not God. I don't judge people. She has a decades-long history of faith as a Methodist. She talks about what happened in youth group. She feels like her life, she's shady and she lied.
Totally.
But President Obama's kids baptized in a Christian church, 25 years in the Christian church, married in a Christian church, runs the prayer breakfast, explicit confession of Jesus. Is why, on what basis are we to judge people and say whether they're Christians or not? Maybe Trump does have a faith. I hope he does.
Yeah.
But I don't like it when he makes fun of a man with a disability in front of a stage, in front of millions of people.
Yeah.
Or makes these comments about African Americans, or these comments about Mexicans, or these comments about women, telling people we need to treat them like shit. Like, it just doesn't line up.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't.
On and on we go.
Someone said he's a baby man. Yeah. All right. What else? Anything else we need to discuss?
I think that
about
comment, we as Christians don't agree on what is social injustice.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem.
I agree. I do think that is part of the problem. I think there's very, very different views.
A Democratic convention coming up
in
2 days. So
yes, let's hope this one is not quite as dramatic.
Oh, it's going to be a well-oiled machine.
I hope so. We'll see. All right, we will be posting these on our respective blogs in the next couple days, and would love to hear your continued comments. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week.